getting a connecting message in case this is coming through. There. Hello and welcome to our very next keynote. This is a really good keynote, so I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. But first, before we begin, let's take a minute to transition once again into just being present with what is to come. Just the fact that we've taken time to pay attention to this experience versus whatever has been going on in your life before. We'll take about 30 seconds or so just to check in, take a breath and relax. And just remind your nervous system that you're going to be paying attention for a while. It's okay to put things on pause. Take a breath and relax. And just notice, what's it like to be you right now? All right. I think it's really important to honor our neurology and give ourselves a little time to transition. Transition is a big part of a mindfulness practice in my book. And here's Mark.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank
Love
you.
those. So, hi everyone. Mark Montalban here. We're ready to start this next talk here. And we have a bit of an update. Due to unavoidable circumstances, Michael Foster, our next speaker, is unavailable to appear live. He was really looking forward to this, but unexpected circumstances made it impossible.
But don't worry, because we have an incredible experience for you, because you're still going to hear Mike deliver a really powerful message. Now, this is a really, really powerful message. So allow us to explain.
Mike is the founder and chairman at IOSM, which is the Institute for Organizational Science and Mindfulness, as well as the founder, past chairman, and CEO of the Human Capital Institute. In our conversations with Mike, we've found that he has his finger on the pulse of what's going on in the adoption of mindfulness in organizations, and some very important things to say on the topic.
In fact, I think we mentioned earlier, it was through IOSM facilitation training that Mark and I first got together and discussed producing this very event. As luck would have it, I was also the host of the Organizational Mindfulness podcast that was produced by Mike and his organization. So I was hosting a series of podcast video interviews with major names in mindfulness. And lo and behold, the very first one of those podcast video interviews was with Mike on the subject of mindfulness and the state of mindfulness adoption in organizations. And so we have this great conversation, and it never aired. And so what we have for you is a world premiere that we're excited to see.
We're excited to present this brand new interview with Michael Foster, whose vision in creating a nonprofit to help organizations adopt mindfulness is inspiring and much needed.
And I should mention that IOSM is a supporting organization for TFIM, and they've helped us get the word out. So we're great to have them in alignment with what we're doing and to help us along. So we're pleased to present for the first time anywhere a video interview with Michael Foster. This will take just a moment to queue up, and here we go. This very first edition of the Organizational Mindfulness Podcast, I'm going to be talking with Michael Foster, the founder of the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness, about what we're up to here and how we get started and our vision for this podcast, which is really amazing and fun, and we're having a great time. So Michael, welcome to the podcast, which we are both co-creating. So it feels weird to welcome you, but here we are.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. I really appreciate that. And I I just want to thank you for raising your hand and becoming the master of ceremonies and the host for this new series. We really appreciate it. You're an accomplished
Oh,
guy,
thank you.
and we really are looking forward to your conversations with, all the great folks that we've
Well,
lined up. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. I'm not sure if you actually asked me the
well,
question, Brett,
let me
but
ask the question. What are you doing with the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness? It's like, when I
sure.
encountered you, I was on the web and I'm looking at LinkedIn and I'm going, look at this. These guys are like IOM. They're like this Aetna and Ford. I was looking at the webcast and I saw, oh, then they've got these
Hmm.
communities in various cities and stuff. And I said, I need to find out what these guys are up to. And I actually reached out to IOM and said, hey, let's get an organization started in Seattle. And we started
Right.
talking about that. And then this thing segued into a podcast. And you said, I'd really like to do a podcast. And that's how we got started with that. But, I didn't at that time, I don't think fully appreciate kind of the vision and scope of what you're up to here. So fill us in a little bit on
Right.
how IOM got started and your vision.
Okay, so the thumbnail is that the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness is a relatively new nonprofit association. We have about 4,200, 4,300 members today. Most of those members are human capital and operating leaders inside of business organizations. We have a number of members that are coming from healthcare, a number that are actually coming from education, universities, et cetera, and are essentially academics, and a number that are coming from the government,
Mm-hmm.
military branches, and government agencies. So what we all share is a determination to bring science-based, performance-focused mindfulness into our organizations. We share the knowledge, if you will, of the new science that has emerged over the past two
Mm-hmm.
decades, and that very clearly offers a real framework for secular, completely secular interpretations of mindfulness concepts and mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
practices. And so, mindfulness is at this place in its evolution, if you will, modern mindfulness, if you will, where it's been in the public realm now for several decades, and everyone sort of has a sense that mindfulness is a good thing, that mindfulness helps, that mindfulness is applicable to, for example, stress reduction, that it's a good mental exercise set to sort of add on to your daily regimen of personal development. But what's really not known yet is the extent to which two things. One is that what mindfulness can actually do to help develop mental and emotional skills that go beyond just stress relief. They go beyond, sort of simply even health and well-being, and really go to strengthening and developing and creating competencies and capabilities that are performance based and really important for
Mm-hmm.
organizations. So organizations have been bringing mindfulness in as kind of a stress relief employee
Mm-hmm.
benefit. And one of the initiatives that we think is central, to our mission, is to raise awareness in the corporate ranks, if you will, that mindfulness actually does a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that it really is a process that strengthens awareness, attention control, emotional regulation, and that those attributes can be applied inside an organization to develop stronger business competencies, to develop more effective leaders, to develop a workforce that is more motivated, more engaged, more interested and curious about what they're doing. And it offers emotional intelligence benefits as well, so that people are able to collaborate more fully. It supports inclusion. These are kind of sweeping statements. But if we come back to the science, we see that, this is a very, very legitimate logic path, right? So that means that mindfulness is a really big deal. For the last forever, companies have been trying to help their employees, their leaders and employees, feel great about themselves, or, to feel fulfilled in their job, or to be engaged in the company itself. And they've always wanted to help their people with their cognitive capabilities and their emotional capabilities. But many of the tools that have been available for personal development have been kind of locked up in the, spiritual, religious, family dinner table, social, neighborhood, batch of learning. And so companies have always assumed that that's where we learn these kinds of skills. And they want to hire those skills, but in order to strengthen them or train them, corporations have never had the capability to actually sort of use those techniques or teach those kind of mental and emotional skills. They've been, really hands off, as they should be, right? Companies and public education, should not be teaching any particular belief system, right? Whether it's New Age or Buddhism or Catholicism or any belief system. But for the past 40 years, science, neuroscience, psychology, biology have all taken a deep dive into the question of, can the mind actually change the brain? Can it change the structure and function of the brain and the body? And the consensus very strongly now is across the science community and across all these different disciplines is yes, it certainly can. So there's great evidence that the way we think, how we structure our thoughts, how we respond to the thoughts and emotions that appear in the brain and then ultimately in consciousness, can actually create real change in the brain and actually real change in the body. And this is a realization that creates a massive inflection point in how we're able to now teach our people, how we're now able to not just train business skills, not just train technical skills, not just train sales or leadership skills, but actually help train mental and emotional skills. And these are mental and emotional skills that help our people become better humans. Okay, these are mental and emotional skills that help them become better fathers and brothers and mothers and children and friends and co-workers. These are outcomes that help each individual be able to really have a different relationship with their stress and their anxiety and their worries and all of these mental models that sort of exist in our non-conscious. This is incredibly valuable for the individual person. And the theory of human capital is that person will then bring that capital and they have the right to choose where they contribute that human capital. But, the theory is that they will bring that to work the next day and that they will contribute that renewed sense of engagement, motivation, the renewed sense of happiness, the renewed sense of sort of satisfaction with their life. And for every individual that doesn't kick the cat on the way to work every morning, right? Or doesn't get into a fight with their spouse or their kids, or doesn't, that person is coming into the organization and taking just one more little piece of toxicity out of the environment. So this is an incredibly positive investment, if you will, that companies can make that we've never been able to make before. We've never been able to present, and still to a great degree aren't able to present these kinds of teachings without the worldview and the belief system that we have to ask people to buy into in order to realize the value. What science has done is, one, it's literally opened the door to our being able to discuss these capabilities as proven science, okay? And it's also done enough research now. I mean, literally, there's 6,000 to 8,000 studies that have been done in the past 2 decades on meditation and mindfulness, and its impact on health, its impact on cognitive performance, its impact on emotional intelligence. And now, for the last decade, there's another big group of research reports that have been done on how it fits into the organization, how it fits into organizational development, leadership development, etc. And so we now have a body of information that allows us to build an entire curriculum around mindfulness through an all science, not just science-based, but an all science lens, so that we can look at the science of mindfulness. This is an incredible step forward, and we just simply don't know it yet. 98% of the sort of corporate leaders out there in the world, again, have a positive view overall. They have a sense that there's something good about mindfulness. They probably have the knowledge that it's good for stress relief, and so it would be really good to give their people an employee benefit that helps them learn mindfulness. But they don't yet understand or know, and this is our mission at IOM, is to help them gain the awareness that mindfulness really is a way to transform the organization, one individual at a time. And that's really the only transformational lever that we have. We've all made believe that our people are going to become happier and more engaged if we give them more employee benefits, or if we put a pool table in the employee lounge, or put a restaurant in the campus,
room, right? On the warehouse floor.
Yeah, right. A meditation room or a nap room. And, these things are simply not going to move the needle. And, we can see that over 2 decades of experimenting with them. The only thing that's going to move the needle is when each individual in an organization is bringing a better version of that individual into the organization. And the ability now to give them those tools to help their own lives, their own families, and then naturally bring that back into the organization is a really new and really, really exciting prospect. So that's what IOM is about. IOM is about being able to tell that story, be able to raise awareness, at the corporate level, but also build the structures across that chasm from where we are today that allow that to become a reality. So, in order to really bring mindfulness into an organization and have it literally proliferate across thousands and thousands of desktops, there must be a set of standards and practices that everyone that teaches mindfulness inside an organization adheres to, right? And the simplest one is, hey, we only teach science when we go to an organization. We can teach whatever we want to teach in our own studio or in our own classes, but when we go inside an organization, there has to be a set of rules around, where you draw that bright line between belief system and science. Another structure is that that there should be a curriculum again, that has some certification levels in it, so that mindfulness teachers and others, coaches who are teaching mindfulness, have an ability to certify their knowledge and to certify what they are teaching. And then a third structure, and this is not the only set of structures, but a third structure is some reliable way to measure the outcomes, so that we do understand what is happening on the other side of the training, right? What are the outcomes? And then how do you connect those outcomes to actual business results, to actual financial results? So IOM, the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness, has as a mission, first, this raising of awareness, second, the building of these structures that allow mindfulness to actually come in and hopefully transform organizations. And then the third big component of our mission is that we need to help all of the teachers and all of the coaches and all of the service providers that are bringing, this knowledge into the organization, and make sure that they are upskilled, so that they're not only expert, if you will, in teaching mindfulness practices and mindfulness concepts, but they're expert in teaching those in a 100% science framework, right? So understanding the science is critical, and also upskilling them to understand how to apply that science to applications, inside the company. So in other words, how to apply mindfulness to create personal performance, and how to convert that personal performance into organizational performance. And so these are teachers and coaches that not only know how to teach mindfulness, but they know how to integrate that mindfulness into a workplace. They know how to turn that into programs that have specific outcomes of their own, in creating more effective leaders, in creating more effective client-facing sales and customer service people, in creating more effective software engineers who might be building the product, etc. So this is a long-term enterprise, but this is the point in the marketplace, if you will, where we can actually take these new paradigms and bring them in and begin to act on them.
And so this is such a big vision, and you think the time is now. You think we're at an inflection point right now with all of this?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons we're at this inflection point. One is that again, there's been sufficient science that we can literally, very confidently apply that to building all science curriculum. This is a science class now. It's still being taught as a belief system, but that literally everything that matters, everything that is not, theological doctrine and dogma or a spiritual belief, or, all of the, the body of information that relates, to personal performance and to organizational performance is science proven now. So that's a huge inflection point. That allows us to teach it in a way that is acceptable, right, to public schools, for example. There should be a lot of pushback to the idea that teachers are coming in and teaching essentially what is modern Buddhism. Buddhism is a wonderful, tapestry of beautiful beliefs, and doctrine and philosophy and Eastern science, but it's all mixed together, and it requires sort of an ascent from people learning mindfulness in that way, that they either adhere to that worldview or they're okay with that worldview. Okay, and that's just not going to scale. So this idea that science is sufficient enough now to teach a science class, both in the corporation and the schools, is a critical inflection point. The other contributor, if you will, to this being the moment, right? To this being the moment when everything changes, is that, we're in a tipping point because of the last 18 months, 2 years of pandemic stress and anxiety and worry and concern. But it's not the pandemic that's creating the inflection point. It's literally 40 years of year over year over year increase in a series of what we think of as 21st century suffering. These are ailments, if you will, or maladies, if you will. Another way to look at them is these are intractable human capital challenges that have grown up and that we have not been able to figure out a solution to. So this idea of information overload didn't exist 30 years ago. Today it's creating massive amounts of chronic stress, and that has a huge impact on our productivity, and it also creates massive amounts of stress. The idea of the rise in anxiety disorder, 30%, or I guess it's over 20% of Americans today are on some kind of anxiety medication. Another 30% are estimated to actually qualify for that medication, but they're simply not diagnosed. That's 50% of the population is experiencing anxiety, over the baseline. That's a crisis. We have a social and political crisis of conflict that really is bubbled to the top in the last 18 months, but it's been with us again for decades, and it's been scaling year over year. There's more harassment, there's more bullying, there's more, microaggression. These are human capital challenges that are getting worse every year. And so these are what has bubbled over. This is really what's contributed to the tipping point. Sure, the pandemic is a perfect storm. The pandemic, is a global health crisis, an economic crisis, job insecurity, fear for the health and wellness of your parents and your children and your loved ones, and a complete massive disruption in your work, and having to come home and very possibly have one or both spouses being laid off, at least temporarily. I mean, this is a big deal. And then the kids come home from school, and now you're sort of also in the business of homeschooling partially and dealing with them all day long as you're trying to deal with these other massive, disruptions. And now we're entering an entirely new phase of that. Now we're being diagnosed with reentry anxiety. And seriously, 82% of Americans, just in March, I believe this study was done, 82% of Americans say, I'm as stressed or more stressed today than I was last year at the very height of the COVID crisis and of the COVID fears. So, our anxiety around going back to work, some people don't want to wear a mask. Other people feel like everybody needs to wear a mask. These are societal conflicts that are mirrored in our workplace. And people are anxious about going to that workplace. They may be anxious about being infected. They may be anxious about sending their kids to school or not sending their kids to school. There is a tremendous perfect storm that this pandemic has generated, but really it's putting us over the top of decades of increasing stress, increasing unhappiness, increasing frustration, increasing anger. and in the workplace. You know, 5 years ago, the National Institutes of Health said that the primary source of premature death is actually chronic stress, and that the primary source of chronic stress is at work, whether you're working in an office or you're working from home. You know, it's a direct line, you know, from the workplace to chronic stress to all kinds of, you know, ailments, including premature death. So this is a big deal. So those two, you know, sort of the problem is coming in, and actually all of a sudden companies are having to deal with it. Right? Having to deal with the great resignation.
Right.
You know, there's never in history has there ever been a time when so many people have simply quit.
Goodbye.
Right? Right? And at the same time, you know, new numbers have come out on employee engagement. And, you know, the new numbers are that only 15% of people in the organizations remain engaged with their job. Again, that's never been that dire. You know, it's never been an emergency like that. So that on one side is an enormous problem that, you know, organizations have to deal with. And on the other side of the tipping point, or on the other side of the inflection point, is the fact that we have a solution to it. It's not a perfect solution. It's not an inoculation. You don't wave a wand and it happens all at once. But we have a way to teach people about their brain, about how their brain works, about how their brain reacts and responds, you know, to all of this confusion and chaos in the atmosphere, in the ether, and gives them really a set of emotional tools and mental tools to be able to change those mechanics.
Amazing.
We've never had that before. So that's a huge factor. And these problems boiling over, they're meeting in the middle. And that's what's producing the inflection point, at least, we think.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like such a big vision. And when you put it this way, it seems like it's there's this urgency in it. And then also the thing the way to scale this is through the organizational framework as well, because, you know, if you're going to do this, you can't do this one at a time at a webinar. It's going to have to be. So the organizations need it. The science is in, and the people need it. So, like, what's the problem, right?
Well, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer if you understand, you know, where we are. You know, and again, it's a big challenge because a very small percentage of the population, even the people that are read in and understand what mindfulness is and what it can do, you know, haven't necessarily made this leap to you know, how can I look at this through a lens and communicate it through a lens that the corporation can understand. So, you know, even in our own sort of community of, you know, mindfulness, if you will, teachers or experts or thought leaders or whatever, there's a very small number who have actually seen this kind of big picture. And almost nobody in the organization understands it yet. Again, because this is not the way that we look at mindfulness today. This is not the way that the media, you know, has ever portrayed mindfulness, because they haven't been read in either, right? And it's not the way that our, you know, our base of mindfulness teachers and thinkers and gurus, it's not the way they perceive, you know, reality today, you know, and because for 40 years they've been learning mindfulness through a specific framework. And so for them, that, you know, that works. And it does work. It's great for them, you know, but it's not going to change or transform the organization, right? Until the organization understands what it is they want. In this new world, the organization is the client. So typically, if I'm a mindfulness teacher, my client is a person. And so my value proposition to that person is that, this is a set of mental and emotional skills that will help you, deal with, cope with stress and anxiety and confusion. It'll help you develop the traits, the emotional traits that can make you more human and more kind and more courteous. And you will be a happier, more fulfilled individual. And that is the promise that we offer when we look at an organization, that we're promising to every individual. But our client is the organization. Right. So we have to be able to communicate with the organization in a way that they can clearly see the scientific outcomes of this kind of training, that they can see that there is no, sort of political pushback, social pushback, religious pushback, that it really, fits the criteria of being, all science. And that if they make this investment, it's going to work for the individual. Now, it's not going to work for all of those individuals. It's going to work great for a small population of individuals who see the value, who model, the 7 out of 10 CEOs of the largest companies in the world that meditate every day, and who see this as a true, personal development and powerful personal development tool. And they're not going to reach, the 10% or 15%. It's a Pareto curve, right? They're not going to reach the 10% on the other side. But everyone in the middle will get something out of learning about how their brain works and learning how they can, remove the panic and the fear and the anxiety and the worry that is so uncomfortable and so unpleasant, and makes them so unhappy. They're all motivated to be happier. We all are. That's that's what we want, right? So the organizational value proposition is that if you can provide this kind of training literally to everyone, okay, that a large percentage of the people in your organization are likely to be coming to work, right, and behaving in a different way, some in a slightly different way, some in a very different way, but every single action that's different from a negative action that might have happened before this training is, again, a piece of toxicity that comes out of the system. So if one manager who just doesn't believe in this stuff at all, it's like, I don't want anything to do with it, sits in a class, learns about, the fact that the brain's essentially 2 million years old, and without our knowing it, it's creating, stress and creating problems for us. So never does a meditation, never, right? But away from that training takes just that one concept that, I don't have to get mad because my brain is getting mad, right? I actually have control over that space between the stimuli that unconsciously my brain has always gotten angry about. I have the ability to detach just enough to not get mad, right? So let's say that manager goes into his meeting tomorrow morning with his 9 people on his team, and somebody says something or looks in some way or something happens, they would normally send them into a tirade.
I have been in that meeting.
But they don't. Let's say they don't one time, That saved 9 people from having a crappy day. That is the difference between any of those other 9 people creating, real hardship and real, unhappiness, and it's the difference between those 9 people being able to go from that meeting and concentrate on something fully, or those 9 people being upset and leaving that meeting with with the confusion of being upset. This is not insignificant, right? And if that happens with not just one manager, but 10 managers today, you're beginning to create a completely different, less toxic, non-toxic environment in your company,
Mm-hmm.
right? And putting a pool table in the faculty lounge or in the, in the break room does not accomplish that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And telling everybody that they need to be happy does not
Sure.
accomplish that. What accomplished that is one individual, who is able now to control their emotions to the extent that they don't go nuclear in a
Mm-hmm.
conference room where they didn't even think about
Mm-hmm.
it before. It's just something that happened. Their brain did it.
So how do we get?
So it's
It's
big.
huge. It's massive. So what then is the vision for the podcast in relationship to this? How is it that Michael said, what we need here? We need the organizational mindfulness podcast. Let's see if we can bootstrap that.
Well, we have a whole series of activities underway, if you will, at IOM that are aimed at this kind of, raising consciousness that there is something different in town, that we can look at this set of tools in an entirely new way, that, the teachers can actually take learn advanced techniques that can help them not just teach mindfulness, but teach mindfulness effectively inside organizations. We have a series of webcasts, for example, where we are on a monthly basis, we're interviewing the experts now who were early adopters, who started these initial programs inside these great companies. So we've interviewed, the people that started the program at Microsoft and Intel and Google and SAP and, on and on, Morgan Stanley and et cetera. And the notion there is so that our members can have access to people that have actually done it. They've kind of been able to upsell the idea that this is an important process. They've been able to actually build an internal course of some kind, and they're actually leading, meditations and doing other activities that support, a mindful workforce or a mindful workplace. Where we saw the opportunity here for a podcast is that we have many people. In fact, our members represent people that really don't know anything about mindfulness. They've heard of it, they know a little bit about it, but they're not in the inner circle, in the bubble of people that are already kind of, they're the choir, right? When you're singing to the choir,
people, yeah.
Like there's a lot, right? There's a lot of people that, I get it, I want it. I'm great with, the Buddhist teachings. I'm great with, that's what I want. And that's a huge population of people. Don't get me wrong. But there's a much more vast population of people out there that never rises into their consciousness. What's in their consciousness is simply that they're underwater and they're confused and they're unhappy, right? And so we want to bring, these are people that have malaria that have no idea that you can get a shot that can cure malaria, okay? So what we're trying to do is reach out to organizations and have them essentially give that kind of an inoculation, if you will, mental inoculation to their workforce. So there are a number of really wonderful thought leaders and gurus, if you will, people who have been essentially massively influential, in the media, and sort of have, are part of the history of modern mindfulness. People like Sharon Salzberg, who literally was an inflection point of her own, right? When she came back from Burma and began to teach mindfulness in a very sort of a Western dialect, if you will. People like Ron Siegel, who is a Harvard professor, who, is, again, one of the early experts in the science of mindfulness and bringing it, sort of into the mainstream. Rhonda McGee, who was the chairman, I believe she may be still the chairman at Search Inside Yourself, which is a wonderful organization that came out of Google. who is, extremely articulate on the issues of mindfulness and inclusion and diversity,
the inner work of
etc.
racial justice, I think, is her book. It's amazing. Yeah.
Her new book. Yeah, I mean, these are really, really great people who have very strong perspectives on the value of mindfulness. So the vision behind this podcast is, let's bring these people in, right, and interview them about how they feel about this idea of organizational mindfulness, to get their experience in organizations, because all of these people have great early adopter kind of experience in working with the really early progressive companies around mindfulness. So these are true thought leaders. And again, we have the monthly webcast around, that introduces the people that have actually built mindfulness programs inside companies. And the podcast is a much more conversational, if you will, interview with the thought leaders, behind that.
Yeah,
Does that make
totally.
sense?
And and here we are doing an interview with a thought leader behind it, and I just am really so happy to talk to you about this and hear your framing of this gigantic issue and how visionary it is and how powerful it is to hear you speak about it. And I just want to say thanks, on behalf of the mindful community, and for launching the podcast. And it's just going to be great. We've already got episodes queued up and ready to roll. And it's going to be a ton of fun. All the people that you mentioned, we have episodes with, so we hope our listeners will look for that. And so, Michael, where can people find out about the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness?
Well, our website is www.iomindfulness.org. You can look us up on LinkedIn. We have a pretty robust presence there with a news feed and a LinkedIn group. We'd love to have you join our LinkedIn discussion group. And we're posting a lot of content out on LinkedIn. We'd love to have anyone in the audience consider becoming a community member. Community membership is free, and it unlocks a lot of the sorts of resources that we have. So you can attend webcasts, you can access a pretty good slice of our own original research. It opens up access to a whole library of resources that, if you're learning about mindfulness today, you can actually learn about scientific mindfulness. You can actually learn about mindfulness that connects to human performance, okay? And that's different. It is different than, approaching mindfulness through a spiritual lens or a religious lens, etc. And I want to make sure everyone understands that, we completely embrace, I believed in mindfulness for 40 years before science validated that my beliefs were actually true. So it isn't that there's any pejorative, sort of attitude towards belief systems here. All science starts with a belief. All science starts with a logic path. All science starts with a thesis. And, I find it astonishing and amazing that 3,500 years ago, the Buddha, among other 3,500-year-old philosophers, had the capacity to envision this structure that has become Buddhism, etc. So there's we embrace those legacy and traditional ideas and beliefs, and have a lot of our own spiritual beliefs. But we find it absolutely critical to draw that line and be able to learn about mindfulness in a way that is completely secular, completely science proven, okay, and that actually connects to what is creating suffering in the modern world. Okay, we don't have warlords, riding through the village cutting people's heads off anymore, right? But we have people cutting us off in traffic. Our brains haven't evolved to tell the difference, and that creates anxiety and stress and suffering. So it is important, I think, to if you want to embrace the full tapestry of spiritual belief and worldview, that's wonderful, and we encourage you to do that. If you would like to understand this body of information, again, without that, essentially in the secular, science-based frame, then that's what we're producing and aggregating and providing at the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness. When you Google mindfulness, there's, I don't know, something like 300 million results. Okay, so good luck, getting out there and figuring out mindfulness. So what we've done as a public service is, and we're continuing to do this, is we've curated that mass of information, and really tried to pull out the most real, logical, reasonable, credible resources that support mindfulness, through this scientific lens, and that actually look at mindfulness in a way that would be helpful for personal development, helpful beyond just stress relief, helpful in developing your capability to focus, your capability to really control and manage your emotions, your capability to, work and deal with other people, in a much more effective manner, right? So these are performance aspects or performance outcomes that are critical in business, and they're critical in companies, and they're critical to your career, okay? So you can actually access this information in a way that connects those dots, right? At the same time, you can connect the spiritual dots. But when you come to when you come to our site and you join our organization and you begin to engage with our, sort of educational programs or research or webcasts, you are hopefully benefiting from what we've curated to point you in that direction.
Amazing. Yeah. And I would encourage listeners to go look at the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness website, iomindfulness.org. And there is a ton of stuff out there, and it's really, really useful and high quality, like you say. So thank you. And this has been a ton of fun, Michael, and I really appreciate you taking the time to introduce listeners to the podcast and to IOM and to your big vision and the power of it. So thank you so much. Wow. That's amazing. He's just so articulate and powerful about his vision and insight. It's really quite an experience for me to hear that.
So for anybody here that wants to engage with Mike or IOSM, take a look at the chat. We posted out some links there. Thank you all for being here. We'll close this session now, and you'll have an opportunity to network in the lounge for a few minutes. Our next session will be Cliff Smith, and we will see you all there.
Thanks now. Bye.